Hi, it's Chris with Implied Music, and I'm breaking some of my camera rules with having a light over my shoulder, but I want to shoot the keyboard today because I want to talk a little bit more about chromatic mediants. It's a fascinating topic. A lot of subscribers and just new viewers are interested in it, and I've got some questions from folks, and I just want to try to clear up a couple of ways I think about it, show some things on the keyboard, maybe listen to some more sounds. I think the real important thing is just to get in there and try it for yourself, because there's lots of ways to accommodate this to your own music. But let me show you some of the ways I use it. I think the most important distinction with chromatic mediants is the word chromatic. And let me just play the sound for you in case it's not something you're really familiar with. It's an epic sound, and I think that's really what it's useful for. And typically, what we're going to do with a chromatic mediant is to have a root that moves by a third, not by a fourth or a fifth, as in sort of common tonic dominant relationships, but by thirds. And to make it chromatic, what we have to do is have those roots be the roots of chords that aren't in the same key. Now, if I go from C to E minor, both of those chords are in a couple of key signatures. They're in G, they're in C, A minor, etc. It sounds fine. All those chords are in the key of C. All three of those chords are in the key of G. Doesn't sound chromatic. Sounds okay, but not epic. Now, in order to make it sound a little fuller and surprising, give it that cinematic quality, C, E major, that's a stunning and fun sound. Now, I want another major key a third away. How about G sharp? My roots were C, E, G sharp, and I played major chords on each of them. Very interesting. So C, E, A flat, or G sharp. I can use any instrumental form following that rule. Now, for me, making those chords flow smoothly from one to another, it comes from having common tones. Now, obviously, when I'm going from C to E, the common tone is E. Going from E to G sharp major, the common tone is this key. Here it's G sharp, here it's G sharp also. In fact, I might think of this instead of G sharp as A flat. A flat major is somehow easier for me to think. Well, those were major triads, and they moved in major thirds. And it's a pretty strong sound, but not particularly spooky or weird. What if we move in minor thirds? Let's test that out. Here's my C chord. It's a major chord. I want to have a common tone moving to a new chord, and I want that new chord to be a third away, so a minor third away now, which gives me two possibilities. I can go up to E flat, I can go down to A. So let's go up to E flat. This is nice, kind of giving me Lord of the Rings. And I kept my voicing so that my voices moved only in steps or not at all. The G stayed where it was, the C dropped, and the E dropped. Now, here I am on E flat, and it's E flat major. I can go up another minor third. Up a minor third from E is G flat. And I'm going to play a major chord there as well. I get to keep this note on top, and my voices move just by a step in the other positions. When my voices move just by a step, I get a smooth sounding voicing, and this can be really the best and most beautiful way to handle this kind of thing. Just to be complete, what's a minor third up from G flat? We would have to call it, I hate to say this, B double flat, but let's call it A instead, just to keep our brains from melting. So G up to A, it's a minor third. On the page, it kind of looks like a second, a G to an A, but on the keyboard, it's obviously a minor third. And if we made that a major chord, I would smoothly move like so. This note didn't move at all, and the top two notes moved down by a step. So now I have this beautiful sequence: C, E flat, G flat, A. Each of those chords might take its own new scale. In fact, you'd have to make tiny little changes. For the C scale, I could play that. I could probably also play G major and it would work. But I have to say, when I go to the E flat, I've got to make changes, right? The E has to become E flat. If there was a B in my scale, the B has to go down to B flat. So I might write a melody. Those tiny little changes. And those tiny little changes give me this kind of beautiful epic sound. Whew, I got out of control there. So we just were looking at major triads. And as it happened, those major triads moved by major thirds or minor thirds. Let's look at some minor triads. C minor. And we'll move to a new triad a third away. We've got, as we now know, 4 possible places to go. We could go up a minor third. We could go up a major third. We could go down a minor third or go down a major third. These are called chromatic mediants because the new chord that I'm moving to can't be in the same key as the chord that I came from. So it sounds surprising, weird, and different. If I went from C minor to E flat major, it would sound fine, but both of those chords live in a bunch of different keys together. But if I go from C minor to E flat minor, there's no key signature that has both of those chords. And as a result, it's a pretty strong sound. That was up a minor third. Let's go C minor, E minor. That's surprising. It almost feels like it's lightening up, doesn't it? It feels like it's opening out. From E minor, let's go up to G minor. And then B flat minor. Oh, that was really pretty. I went up basically a C dominant chord, and I got some interesting results. C minor, E minor, G minor, B flat minor. Each of those would take a new scale if I was melodicizing it. It's so interesting, isn't it? You've got to know your scales. You've got to know the chords in like every scale that's interesting, that's, involved in what you're doing. And that can be a challenge. But fortunately, there's only, that's a finite number of scales to deal with. But let me just quickly review what you really have to keep in your mind. The one chord in a major scale is major. Now, the mediants from that key are E up a major third. The major third is in the scale. And on that major third, there's a minor triad, E minor. If I go from C to E minor, That's not a chromatic mediant. It's just a mediant. That's what they actually call it in European music theory. Now, if I go down a third in scale, I get to A. And when I say C major, A minor, it sounds great. There's a million chords progressions that use that world. C major, A minor. That's a mediant motion, but it's not chromatic. They're both in the same key. In fact, the A minor is called the submediant in the scale, in the same way that going up a fifth is the dominant and going down a fifth is the subdominant. Going up a third is the mediant. Going down a third is the submediant. Now, know your scales and you won't get tangled up in the chromatic versus non-chromatic thing. And so you might go from C to E major, and that's a chromatic mediant, despite the fact that it gets used in pop music all the time. Think about this progression: C, E, F, F minor. Now, here's the reason I kind of love that progression, because it uses a chromatic mediant to E, then the 4 chord, which is just a normal diatonic chord, and then a borrowed chord from the parallel minor, F minor. That's the chord there. And F minor, the 4 minor chord, is borrowed from C minor before we go home to C. Sometimes chromatic mediants can sound to my ear in songs like they're borrowed chords from the parallel minor. For instance, a pop song in C, C, E flat, G. The E flat was definitely a chromatic mediant motion, but it felt kind of like a borrowed chord from the parallel minor. And it's a great sound. Sounded like it was in G, didn't it? It sounded like 4, flat 6, 1. Chromatic mediant, super powerful. It's part of our toolkit in contemporary music. And I want to encourage you to just get to your guitar or get to the piano and try some of these things out. Looking at it on the video and listening to somebody talk about it, a couple of things can happen. Your ear can recognize the sound, but so many words, right? It's kind of like word salad. But you've got to be able to talk about it. But if you get down on the keyboard or in the guitar and start making the distinction between diatonic mediant motion and chromatic mediant motion, that sort of epic sound will begin to open up. As soon as the chords begin to feel like they're in place, you can start asking yourself the question, well, what scale goes best with that new and slightly weird chord? You may have to make adjustments to your melodic theme in order to accommodate the new chord. There's nothing wrong with that. Perfectly normal. Well, listen, I hope this has been useful. Go ahead and dive in. Chromatic mediants, they're kind of everywhere now. It's a normal thing. I think it's a really good little piece of, just kind of like knowledge to put into your sort of basic musical vocabulary. I hope this has been helpful, and I'll see you next time.